Hi, I'm Izzy.
I'm Mason, and welcome back to Criminal Commentary. So today, what story do we have?
We're talking about Thierry Tilly, the France's greatest con man.
The greatest con in France. It's a pretty recent story as well.
Yeah.
So, essentially, he took control of an entire French family's life for 10 years. It gets pretty crazy, so stick around and you won't be disappointed. So, how about we get started with who this family was?
Okay, so this family contained 11 people throughout many generations. And would you like to explain who the matriarch of this family is?
So the matriarch of the family was Ghislaine de Vidrine. The whole family was called the de Vidrines, and she was kind of the one that called all the shots around the people. But they all had pretty average jobs, even though they were actually descendant of nobility in France, and they had been living around this town called Montflanquin for generations. So what were some of these other jobs that they had?
I believe one worked in pediatrics. He was a doctor.
Pediatrics, yeah. Yep.
And another one worked in business and investment. And
Yeah.
She had
Ghislaine.
another name that goes by May May.
Mm-hmm.
And once Jenny's sister Anne died, their bond got much stronger.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and a very important thing about this family is that even though they had these average jobs, they had an ancestral chateau, like a big castle that overlooked the town of Montflanquin. It was called Chateau Martel, and it's one of these big medieval castles. It has all the towers and it's like a forest on the outside. It's very, very idyllic.
Yeah.
Cool setting.
And I believe their forest leads to a lake.
Mm-hmm.
So that's...
We had their children playing it. So yeah, it was. They were doing pretty well for themselves, even though there were some conflicts in the family, right? So what were some of those conflicts?
One, Jean and Ghislaine. Did I say her name?
Ghislaine.
Ghislaine and Jean had some rough patches throughout the marriage, and Jean believed that she was cheating on him with one of her coworkers named Tilly. That's who we'll be talking about today.
Yeah. So at the same time, there was the matriarch of the family that we talked about at first, Ghislaine, was going through a legal battle for a school in the town. Her son was in the school, and she wanted him to finish his studies, and so she was fighting the school board who wanted to close it down. And so she eventually won this with the help of her lawyer named Vincent. And afterwards, the lawyer recommended somebody to help her clean up the school now that she was the one basically controlling the school. And that person was named Thierry Tilly. And this decision, which is it seems like a pretty small decision, just hiring somebody to clean the place, it would change her life and her family's life forever. Yeah.
So Tilly helped bring up the school with bringing in new advanced technology for everyone, which got the school to be very popular. And he was the administrator for this school in Paris.
Yeah. And he was kind of like, he just miraculously did all of these things for her. Like at one point, Tilly overheard Ghislaine talking about that the computer system in the school was old, and so in a single day she came back and she found all the computer system updated, and so he was just kind of going around fixing all the stuff, and it was like amazing to her.
Yeah. And to go on to the affair that Jean thought he had, after that Ghislaine let Jean meet Tilly, and so that and after that Tilly and Ghislaine got very close with each other, and so the family got to know him more.
Yeah, and he was actually brought to the family during this big dinner, where he met everybody, and of course Ghislaine had told all of them about this guy who she found really mysterious and interesting, that he must have had like some connections in the upper class. He was and everybody else in the family was also very interested in him as well. He sat at the head of the table, so even though he was a guest, he was already sitting in a very authoritative place. I think is interesting very early on, and he would talk about at length about any subject at all. There was somebody talking about like computers again, and he would just know all this stuff about it, or lore, or law and things like that. So he's very well-rounded. He seemed really elusive.
Yeah, and then the family dealt with legal issues. I believe they had an old property that they sold, and the new owners were suing them because they believed that there was like damage and like destruction to the property without the past owners telling them. So Tilly came in and helped them with these legal battles and that made them closer with him. So they got quite fond of him.
Yeah, they did. And interesting as well is that he didn't just get close to Ghislaine, but he also got close to individual family members as well. For example, Ghislaine's son was actually a depressed student, the same one that was that she was trying to keep in the school. And Tilly kind of like took him under his wing and was like, "All right, I'm gonna help you out. I'm gonna make you a good student and like a businessman and all this stuff." And so it made his son better, and it made Ghislaine very happy to have this guy as her confidant.
Yeah. Like throughout, I believe, the story, he ends up helping like most of the children out with like finding opportunities for the future. So
yeah, he definitely does. And so by 1999, which is about a year after they met, Ghislaine hired Tilly full time, and so he was now kind of a very important fixture in her life. He's becoming very central to everything they did.
Ghislaine also had a sister named Christine, and she's a pretty big part of the story.
Yeah, she is. But we'll learn more about that later. So let's talk about also he started claiming to be all these things as well. So to impress many of the family members as well, he also claimed to have many skills and do many things. For example, he claimed to be a professional soccer player, a lawyer, a pilot, a professional skier. He claimed to know several French presidents and several French celebrities, and he claimed to be ambidextrous and professional tennis player, so he could play tennis with both hands. So he was really making himself out to be like a jack of all trades.
So he worked undercover for the UN. Yeah, and sorry. So he made himself very like intelligent and prestigious. He gave that.
Yeah, he was really fostering this idea that he was a secret. He was kind of this like secret, elusive person that had all these connections. And the thing is, the family believed him a lot. They were in a very vulnerable place. For example, Ghislaine's father and her sister had recently died, and of course there was this whole drama about a potential affair. And so Tilly was had a good opportunity to insert himself in.
And like be like a support for them, which they thought was just something innocent and something that wasn't going to end up being a manipulated situation. But what do you think if you were in that spot?
I think honestly I would probably start falling for it. If somebody was like fixing all of my problems like that super easily, I mean literally doing research for this, I was like thinking like, okay, is this guy actually connected to like really powerful people? Is this like is this actually like some guy that has gone rogue? I mean we'll find out who he really is later on, but I think that I would be pretty convinced, especially if I was in a vulnerable place in my life. What about you?
Yeah, I think so too, especially since they're dealing with a lot, especially like the death of family members. I think if someone swooped in and helped me like that, I think I'll be especially if I'm not in a great mind place, it's easier to be manipulated.
Definitely.
So.
And so because of that, he started to slightly take advantage of them financially. Like he started basically running the school. Ghislaine wouldn't even do anything in the school without consulting him first, which shows that she was already not really trusting her own judgment compared to him. And he even told them that he wanted to review their tax info. So he was kind of getting his hand into it and kind of probing for weaknesses, seeing what he could do with it. And and pretty soon he was ready to come out with his big conspiracy. So this is where it gets really crazy, guys.
Okay, so Tilly claimed to be part of the secret government organization group, which was tasked with maintaining balance in the world by fighting corruption. The organization was an offshoot of the Knights of the Round Table, and Tilly had been sent to protect the family with Freemasons. Ooh, Mason. Okay. Who sought to destroy the family.
Yeah, he even added like homophobic and anti-Semitic remarks into this as well. So that is an interesting dimension to this as well. And Tilly said that because he was part of this organization, that that the family needed to follow his every order if they wanted to survive. And so, like, this is crazy, right? Who would believe this?
Yeah. And like, even I think since like he got very close to the family and they trusted him and they brought with his information, they had like no choice to not.
Yeah, it's still kind of crazy to me that they were still able to believe such a like fantastical thing. I think later on they said that they didn't fully believe him really.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's one of those things where it's like maybe they were just so paranoid at that point that they'd rather just be safe.
Yeah. And so Tilly came with a plan. So no one was able to leave unless it was for work. No one answered the phone except for Ghislaine.
Nice.
Yeah, Ghislaine. And so she was the only one to answer, and only answer for Tilly.
And the family was ordered to relocate all of the people that had worked at the chateau. So all their staff, the people that cleaned it, and such, were all forced to leave. And then the family themselves had to start taking care of it, and so they were very busy because of that.
Yeah. Tilly made them believe that they could be spies, so that's one of the reasons.
Yeah. Like even when there was a mailman at the door, they would like not let the person come in even through the gates, because they were that paranoid. And they're even with coincidences, they started to associate it with enemies trying to come after them. So what were some of these things?
Well, one thing I thought was quite shocking that the May, she started losing her vision.
Oh yeah.
And Tilly made her believe, and the family believe, that it was because the enemy was shooting lasers at her eyes, and she was like part of the monarchy of the family, and it was trying to show that they're watching them. When after a few years later, they discovered it's just cataract.
Yeah. so he was like associating these explainable things with these Freemasons coming after them.
And started creating paranoia with them. Like Tilly started to steal stuff around the house, and then made them believe it's someone coming in and stealing. And if they could steal something, then maybe they could hurt them too.
So he was both being the problem. So he was kind of framing these instances. He was probably doing them as well. Besides the cataracts one, there was another instance where a farm trailer was stolen, and that was probably him as well. And he was just trying to really make it seem like people were after them. They were being targeted by something, and so Tilly had to be right? And so he was the only person that could save them. So they kept on trusting him more and more.
And I believe he ends up he finds it the next day and brings it back.
He did find the trailer the next day. So he's like, okay, it's my group that is doing this, and you need to trust me even more and give me even more power.
Yeah. So he creates these situations which made them have more paranoia of what's happening, and the only person they could trust is each other and Tilly, which was part of his plan.
But as we'll find out, not even each other were safe, and everybody was suspect, including Ghislaine's husband, the one that suspected they had an affair the entire time. And so, and her husband was a lot more suspicious of Tilly than Tilly would have liked. And so, how did Tilly deal with that?
He found, we don't know how accurate this evidence is, but we found evidence that Jean was cheating on his wife, so he left the family.
Yeah, it was a pretty violent confrontation. I found the source about how she ran up to him and told him all these things, and when he started to fight back, she had 2 other family members physically throw him out of the chateau onto the ground. And as he was on the ground, getting back up, he said, "I'll end you all."
Yeah. I think their family, so that's quite shocking, but the paranoia that Tilly put into their minds made them somewhat go crazy throughout the years.
Mm-hmm.
And start hurting each other.
Yeah, they couldn't even trust each other because, like, anything that would be against what Tilly's narrative was had to be some sort of plot. So it was a self-building paranoia. And it was in this paranoia that he began to take money from them and really kind of reap the benefits of it. And so what are some examples of him doing that?
He starts, I believe, with Charles, who works at the Patriotic. He had his own business, and so he asked Tilly for help when it was going under, since he has to lay low at home, so he had a hard time working with the business. So Tilly came in, helped. So Charles gave him all the money to deal with, which he ends up taking for his own, and the business going under.
Yeah. And in another instance, he encouraged different children from their dreams to go to private schools in England, in London, yeah. And so he sent them away so that the kids wouldn't get suspicious. And then when he told them to send him tuition money, he just siphoned it away. He didn't even give it to them. So these kids were kind of just stranded, going into debt, until he was just reaping all the benefits from it. And they still believed him completely.
Yeah. There's like one point where Christine was trying to move out, and Tilly made her believe that there was a place, since they had little money because of everything that's going on, a place where she didn't have to pay rent, but she had to help fix around the place. So she moves in, starts to fix everything up before she moves in, and then the landlord comes and says, "What are you doing here? I never said this," and she loses money on working in the house and coming back to Tilly and the family.
Yeah, this was his whole house that they had to move into, because they were in so much debt after what Tilly was doing to them that they had to abandon their chateau. And so Tilly was essentially taken over their chateau, and now they were living in this not aristocratic house.
Yeah. And Tilly made sure that the family had little to no information what's going on. So the less they know, the better, and whatever's happening, they won't suspect anything. And still see Tilly as some hero saving them.
Yeah, and so I think now is a good time to move into the next escalation of this craziness, with Christine's trial. So, but before we do that, do you guys have poems? Do you want to sing? Do you have art you want to share?
No, but I do have photography. Does that work out?
That does, because Dead Center, the Literary and Arts Club of Highland Park High School, is doing a magazine this year, and we are looking for submissions to publish in our professional magazine. So we need photography, we need poetry, we need stories, we need art, and you can submit it all to submitdeadcenter2022@gmail.com. Anything is greatly appreciated. Yes, so late January, the date is still a little bit fuzzy, so but still try and get them in at least by the end of January, and we'll contact you if you have made the cut, and so anything is appreciated. We really want the arts to thrive in Highland Park High School. So.
But
yeah, do it. Woo!
After a few years, Tilly tells Christine he found out new information about the Freemasons, and that they were after ancient treasure that was in one of the bank accounts the family owns. And Tilly goes up to her saying that only she will know it, and that she must figure it out how. Christine responds saying she has no idea what he's talking about, and he believes that she probably just she probably hid it in the back of her mind, trying to think about all the secrets within the family. So Tilly finds ways to bring it out of her. What's one way?
So because she grew up in Brussels, he told her that she needed to go to Brussels to try to like jog her memory. So she went to her like childhood house, and to try and like see like, oh, this might activate something in the back of her mind. Of course, it didn't. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
But Tilly was still furious about it. So when they came back and he was really furious with her that she did not have this code that didn't exist, she just spat out a random code. She was like, I'm done with this. Here you go. And it didn't work.
Yeah, and Tilly got quite mad with her once he figured out she was lying.
Mm-hmm.
And this led to trial.
Yep. You could call it a trial, but it's really disturbing. So the entire house, even more so than it was before, was completely locked down. All the shutters were closed, all sources of light, and all the family was forced into the dining room, where Christine was forced to sit with her back to the family, facing a wall, while they all tried to get the information out of her, including Tilly.
She wasn't allowed to sleep, and like this lasted a few days.
Yeah.
And the husband of Christine ends up making sure she doesn't sleep, which I thought was quite insane because it's your husband. Why are you torturing your wife?
Yeah.
But
they were that manipulated that literally the person that she married was convinced that he needed to keep her awake, to keep her dehydrated as well, because she was barely allowed to eat, and she didn't drink anything either because she wasn't even allowed to use the bathroom. And so all this time she was just suffering, sitting there in that chair because of her husband, who was convinced, Tilly convinced him that she was hypnotized, and if she fell asleep, then she would get like permanent brain damage.
Yeah.
And so it's this terrible situation, and it's this one man with all of his crazy claims causing it all.
And this lasts for like 10 years. The paranoia and
not the trial, just
not the trial.
yeah.
Sorry, the torture.
It eventually ends after a few days.
Yeah, after a few days. So my point being is that Tilly manipulates them and psychologically tortures them for years so you can see that led to a point where they were scared of each other, their own family.
But going back to the trial, why do you think Tilly did that? Like it, because to me it seems a little bit strange that he would make up some money that she could have, and then be mad at her that she does not have it. Like, did he legitimately think that she had some money that he was hiding, or do you think they were just trying to cause chaos?
I think it was part of the plan he had. In our research we figured out that he has this sort of plan, and I think he was after something, since he initially first, you see throughout as we're talking, he steals money from them, and he ends up buying fancy cars, nice jewelry, and a nice house.
Yep.
And so I think he was trying to find a way to gain more money from them, and I think the trial ends up being a last case scenario of that response.
Yeah. And that does make sense, because soon after that he started to instead put them to work. He said he thought, okay, I've taken all the money out of them like a spider or something, and now they're going to work for me and give me 90% of their profits.
Yeah, like
which is insane as well.
And they didn't realize it was as we hear it, that insane, because they trusted him as the only person he trusted, and so this seemed normal for them.
Yeah. But Christine specifically, she began to work at a local restaurant run by a man named Bobby, and so what happened when she took this job?
So once she took a job, they got to know each other a bit more, and Bobby ends up meeting Tilly, and Christine questions Bobby what he thinks of him, and Bobby confesses that he doesn't like him, he thinks he's dangerous, and that he's a bad person.
Yeah, so Bobby sees completely through it. He hasn't been brainwashed for years like they have, so he sees Tilly is manipulating them, and he pushes Christine for more and begins to learn about all the terrible stuff that's been happening for about 10 years. And
Christine started to think Bobby was part of the enemy because of how badly conditioned she was, to a point where she never heard anything wrong about Tilly, and that seemed wrong, and that caused some sort of fear in her. But she does end up telling Bobby what the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
And what?
Yeah, and so after that, they were able to call Christine's family, who had been worried about her for all these years because she'd been cutting them off, and they couldn't get the police to follow it up at all because she's an adult. She has the right to run away, so they didn't suspect anything was wrong. But now that they had her to actually confess that these things have been happening, they started to put together a team of lawyers, of experts, to try and break the family out of Tilly's trap. And so
the first person to leave was Christine, since the experts and the lawyers knew her at first. So, and then after they had slowly had to build a case against Tilly because they can't just take the whole family out, and without arresting Tilly, he could run away. So once they gathered enough evidence, they arrested him.
Yep. In October 2009, almost 10 years after first being introduced to their family and making these crazy claims, Tilly was arrested for kidnapping and abuse. And so he was immediately put on trial. And we start to learn a lot more about who this guy actually is. So
in one of his parts of the trial, he states that he was abused as a child by his father, that his mother had to give up being an ice skater because of him. But then once Tilly's father went on trial to speak out against him, he proves that when he did not get abused, his mother was not any sort of ice dancer or anything.
Yeah.
And all these things he'd been telling everyone are lies.
Yeah, he was like, my wife is not ice skated at all in her life. Yeah. So like he was like really ashamed that Tilly was doing all these things. And over the course of it was revealed that Tilly did not in fact have all these connections, was not some crazy like secret agent. In fact, he was born in 1964 as a reclusive and sickly child who had convulsions, who had bad eyesight, ironically, considering the whole bad eyesight thing that happened. And even, maybe even connections to Freemasons, which is also ironic. But the thing is that he had an amazing memory, which allowed him to read all of these books and encyclopedias and gain all this knowledge, as well as of how humans, work. So he became really good at convincing people to do things, which allowed him to be a really good con man.
One thing that shocked me was that, like, starting off, we see him first as this talented man who had so much success, but it turns out we learned through the trial that he never even finished school.
Yep, he never finished school.
That shocked me.
Yeah, and he even, before this, he tried to create some businesses too, and all of them failed. And you know why?
Why?
Because he conned out all the people that he was working for. So he was already a scummy guy before this, and was pretty much a failure in every respect. And this was kind of his big break until he finally got arrested, of course.
Throughout the trial, he tries to convince the judges and the jury that it was the family's decision. They're the one that took him in and decided to work with him. But throughout time and throughout evidence, they found out that this was a lie. And he was actually sentenced for 8 years in jail.
Yeah, only 8 years.
Yeah, but because of all the pressing he did, saying it was the family's responsibility and their fault, he ended up getting 10.
Yep, he literally he called an appeal while he was in jail. He's saying no, it was their fault, and they were just they extended for 2 years, but still 10 years.
Yeah, he's not saying right.
He stole approximately $6 million US. That's 5.5 million euros, and literally tortured an entire family for 10 years, and he's only in jail for that same amount of time.
Yeah,
that doesn't feel right to me. I don't know.
So when the investigators and the lawyers went to Tilly's house, they found a beautiful mansion, cars, everything nice. Which, think about it, Tilly went home to that while his day job was torturing these people. Not physically, but mentally.
Physically, too.
Oh, yeah, you're right. But, okay, anyways, point being that it's quite shocking to see how he went home to that while he was torturing 11 people who had no money, little to no food, no social contact with anyone else, and yeah, quite insane in my opinion.
Yeah, it's I don't really agree exactly with the court's decision, but
Yeah.
you know, it's not really for us to decide.
And then after and during the trial, when Ghislaine found out that Tilly was guilty, she first didn't believe anyone. Because of the.
It's really tragic.
Yeah, throughout she was conditioned so badly to a point where she believed that this all was part of the plan Tilly had, and wasn't willing to trust anyone else but him.
Yeah. So she still even believed, even after he was arrested and broken down in this way, she still couldn't believe that he was a bad guy. She'd been brainwashed for that long.
Yeah.
You can't undo something like that in like a short amount of time. So it took years
for the family to get better.
Yeah, but they did start to rebuild. The people accepted Tilly's narrative was false, and even started rebuilding their life, and even the pediatrician like rebuilt his business.
Yeah.
And so they're still at least doing all right today. But I think this case, even though how crazy it is, it has some pretty terrifying implications, right?
Yeah, like if it was going to happen to a smart, wealthy family, it could happen to almost anyone.
Yeah, the lawyers were really surprised when they learned about this, because they suspected the family to be, like pretty stupid. Like, how could they believe this? I was kind of thinking the same thing too when I was first learning about this case. But these were educated, well-rounded people that still believed in all these things that he was saying. And so, why do you think that is? It's really interesting to me.
We started this podcast saying that they were dealing with a lot, especially with everyone dying, and I think that they finally found someone they could trust outside the family, because we during research we learned that they had parties often together. They did not have similar views on things, but they were very close-knit, and they had strong relations with each other. So they were able to find someone outside the family to be that for them as well, and I think was part of the reason why this all started to happen. And it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that some of them, like Christine, have talked about how that to an extent they did always know that they were being lied to, and that some of the stuff was fake. But there was so much stuff happening and all this drama happening with the family that they just kind of, it was like superstition. Do you believe in knocking on wood? Do you do that?
To a point, yeah.
Yeah. It's, I feel like it's a very similar idea to that it's it's a bunch of small things over time. You knock on wood because what happened, if it doesn't work, then whatever, but if it does work, then that's much better. And you got to remember, this is over many, many years, and so it was a slow build-up that built into all of this tragedy. So yeah,
that's our podcast, guys.
Yep. Thanks for listening to Criminal Commentary.
Happy holidays.
Yeah. Woo.
Christmas.
Christmas.
All right. Ciao.